Hi guys, welcome to this edition of ArmCareIQ. Today I have a very special presentation for you guys. I've always been asked in baseball, who's stronger as a group? Are pitchers stronger regionally in their throwing arm versus position players? And the interesting thing is that pitchers, they train more frequently. They have much more arm-specific training than position players do typically. I know in my experience, position players would be doing some form of arm care 3 times a week. And the pitchers would have a pretty structured program that would have manuals involved, scapular stabilization exercises, rotator cuff exercises, and obviously some forearm work would be mixed in. And there could be something related to the over volumization of training and why this is happening. I'm going to give you some indicators of why this is occurring. So I wanted to present a new study that's been out on Google Scholar that I've been a part of as a co-author with a great researcher and her team. Her name's Lori Mishner. She's at the University of Southern California. And we looked at 242 professional players. They were mostly minor leaguers. Some are in the major leagues right now. But we looked at geographic regional changes between Latin players and North American players, both position players and pitchers. And then we broke it down to an overall perspective of what's going on. So I'm going to walk you through the graphs. Pitchers are in red and position players are in yellow. And for this particular metric, we looked at external rotation normalized strength. So this is the relationship of force relative to the body weight. And what you can see in external rotation, so that's the strength and pushing back, you can see that the yellow, the middle bar, which is the 50th percentile, is much greater than the 50th percentile or approximate average of the pitchers. So that was statistically significant. So we can say that position players are stronger in their relative strength pushing back in external rotation. Now, when we looked at internal rotation, so that's the strength in terms of rotating the arm forward, or if it's down by my side, rotating it in towards me, you can see that that normalized strength is also greater in position players. So you can see this bar is greater than this bar, and that was statistically significant. Now, lastly, what was very interesting is that the ratio, so looking at the relationship between external rotation force and internal rotation force is important for arm health. And typically, you want to see a ratio level between 0.85 and 1, but some research has shown that most throwing athletes are between 0.65 and 0.75. And I think that needs to be up there a little bit more to balance the strength. But you can also see that the position players had a higher ratio between the two. And it's kind of interesting because, again, they're not training as much as pitchers are, and they don't have as much focused training around the rotator cuff, scapular stabilizers. And I just have a real good visual here about, here's your position player's arm versus your pitcher's arm in an arm wrestle. And we have to be kind of conscious of the fact of how we train our pitchers and how we train our position players, because we may be taking away load from the upper body for a pitcher. So it could be globally, with press strength and pull strength, that position players are they're allocated heavier work, more forceful work. So we can't think about our pitchers as being porcelain, because if you treat them like porcelain, they're going to break. That's basically my mentality about, how to train a throwing athlete. But this is one of the major issues here. This is the paradoxical practice. So we're not assessing competitive throwing as training. So, competition, you have this high amount of volume for pitchers. And then all of a sudden you're giving this post-throwing arm training that also is usually high in volume. It's very low in intensity for the most part, and it's very high in volume, so it's fatiguing. And then they also have more of a volumized approach to their activation. So you're seeing that your pitchers are getting a lot of repetition in their training, and it should be opposite. They need a little more strength. And then on the monitoring side, at least in the sports science realm, there's heavy emphasis on strength testing, which is largely isometric. But in terms of training, it's incongruent. So we call this monitoring incongruence because we're focused primarily on endurance training. Again, we're giving more repetitions when strength is actually affected. We're testing this max strength and we're not really training it. And the other aspect is we're very focused on range of motion in pitchers, and it could be that we're creating extra laxity in their throwing arm, and it's not matching with the strength. So there's some weakness potentially in their architecture of their muscles. So we have to be careful there. This is a study that I thought was very interesting to show another relationship that has been seen in throwing athletes. So there's been studies to show that pitchers, primarily, when they pitch from the beginning of the game until 60 pitches, their blood volume in their arm goes up. And then it hits this peak around 60 pitches. And then every 20 pitches after, in the study that I've read, it goes down. And then 1 hour post throwing, it's actually below baseline. So they have less blood volume in their arms below their resting levels prior to games. That's a big problem, because there could be some, nutrition that the arm's not getting. There's also been studies to show that blood volume in general is much lower in throwing athletes than a normal population. So there's something going on with the mechanism of throwing. But in this particular study, they looked at grip strength here on the x-axis and the association to blood flow in a provocative position. So they did grip strength in a 90-90 position. And what you can see is that at the very bottom level, so if they have very low blood flow, let's say around 10, they tend to have very low grip strength. And you can see this trend line is increasing. So, when they have greater blood flow, towards the outset of 40 milliliters per minute, they're getting close to 90 kilograms of grip strength in some of the individuals. So more studies like this have to be done to be able to evaluate this particular process. Now, in training, I noticed too, when I'm watching throwing athletes, they do a lot of open hand training. There's an exercise protocol called Blackburns. I think they're great. I think they, have a place in training, but you shouldn't make the bulk of your training as a throwing athlete without grip. So with an open hand, using bands with an open hand. Position players, by comparison, they usually do a little bit more grip work, especially if they're benching with a barbell, they're doing pull-ups, typically it's heavier work with a grip. And they may have what we call more irradiation. So that means by gripping, their activation of their forearms is also activating their shoulder, and it's getting a little bit more neural recruitment. And so that's an important process in the training aspect for pitchers. And that might be a reason why we're seeing weakness in pitchers compared to position players. The last thing, knowing that we have, blood issues and we're lacking irradiation, with perturbation training, we also have to be cognizant of what can increase strength and what increases speed of contraction. So when we have low loads, like using the body blade in training post pitching to get blood flow in, it's improving the speed of contraction over a small range and the vibration. And then as we get to heavier influence, maybe use a plyo-care ball, and then we get to hand weights, we have a lot more co-contraction. So the speed of contraction goes down because of the load, and we're getting a lot more recruitment in the exercise. So, although the world is really focused on low load perturbation with body blade related implements of the shoulder spear, with very high speed vibration, we shouldn't neglect heavier load perturbation. And that takes a little bit of a training background to be able to achieve this. But I believe that this can also increase the strength of the throwing arm for pitchers relative to low loads or using weights that are under 5 pounds. So that's my addition to ArmCareIQ. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and look forward to the next one. If you like what you're hearing, please subscribe on YouTube and hit the like button. Thanks.